Hello and welcome to this infrastructure domain session as part of the buildingSMART International Summit here in Marrakesh 2024. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Proctor and I am your moderator. Details of today's session are on the screen. We will be hearing from the Infrastructure Domain Steering Committee and the Roadmap Working Group leads, who will provide an update on the different activities of the working groups. The session is scheduled to last for 90 minutes, including time for questions at the end or as we go through. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to Mark Goldman, who is going to introduce the session more fully, I'd like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. If you're online, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please use the box and I will prompt you to do so. For attendees here in the room, thank you for joining us. Please keep background noise to a minimum, but if you wish to make a comment or a question, they're most welcome. Please raise your hand and we have microphones. I also need to bring to your attention the information that will appear on the screen now. buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider but are open, non-accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. With that, I'm going to hand over to Mark.
Very good, thank you. So as the slide shows, we're sort of in the introduction. We're going to go pretty quickly through that and jump into 4 of the 5 roadmap tracks that the steering committee and other infrastructure domain leaders are leading. I think this is one of the more important parts of the steering committee, the fact that we break up into these working groups and then work with buildingSMART members, as well as some folks who are not necessarily members of buildingSMART, but have a perspective on the topics that we will be covering here. We're going to start out with Alexa Mitchell, dialing in virtually, I'm guessing from Phoenix, Arizona, where it's probably similarly as hot, but probably not as humid in the United States. After that, Mirbek Bekboliev and Yuri Bunes will be presenting as well. So that's 4 of our 5 roadmap working groups that are working towards defining requirements, working on content that our implementers often push forward, white papers, and other deliverables. So with that, Alexa, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mark. And I'm not in Phoenix today, actually. I am in Oklahoma City, and it's quite nice here. But thank you for inviting me today to speak. If at any time we lose audio, please let me know so we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Alexa Mitchell, and I am one of the members of the Infra Domain Steering Committee, and I am leading the efforts for a working group that is looking at developing a white paper that we're calling IFC for Infrastructure User Guide. Next slide. Or do you want me to share mine? Okay, good.
No, I'll move it, Alexa. They should be just coming.
Great.
There's a little delay.
Thank you. All right. So our work group is rather small. I've been working mostly with Marjan Sadeghi from HDR. She's a colleague of mine. Jim Lesh is from the Indiana DOT here in the United States. And Wahat Nassar, I'm not really sure who he's associated with, but he's been in at least one of the meetings. We've had probably 2 or 3 meetings to discuss this white paper. And we came up with a schedule, which is what you're seeing on the screen. We decided that this could be just a volunteer effort because it wasn't as big of a lift to make it a project and submit a proposal. The challenge with that, of course, as you can see, the schedule has moved a little bit. Everybody's been really busy and it's very difficult, even with only 4 people on the working group, to coordinate meetings, times that align with everybody's schedule. So originally, what we looked at was, what do we want to do with this paper and who should be involved in the development of the paper? So the working group is going to create the first draft that we're calling. And then we also identified some of the major software vendors to get some input after the first draft is created. And we met with some of them one time. It was Autodesk, Bentley, Trimble, I think the major 3. And we reached a consensus in terms of, what this document should have and should not have. So once we have a first draft, what we would like to do is to have the Infra Domain Steering Committee review it and provide input. And then we will incorporate those inputs and those comments into a second draft. And we were wanting to present the contents of the paper at Marrakesh, but we were really struggling with developing that content in this amount of time, and trying to find a balance. And I'll talk about those challenges here in a minute. But what we would really like to have at one point is have a community comment period, to see if we hit the mark, and if we didn't, we go back to the drawing board and do a third draft. At which point we will submit that final draft to the committee for final review and input, and then we'll determine whether it needs to be updated or what happens to that document. So so the purple is really more of our current schedule. You can see has slipped quite a bit. So I know that we've been talking about the roadmap for quite some time, and this was identified as a high priority for implementers. So why do we need this guide? Well, with IFC 4.3 supporting the infrastructure domain being relatively new, there is a large part of our community that still do not understand what it means, what you can do with the standard, how to implement it. The documentation is limited and is complex for users, because all the documentation that is available on the standard is meant for software developers, not necessarily the users, right? And so we felt like there's a need to start training people on how to really implement successfully this 4.3 version of the standard. And we've been hearing that a lot of the domain experts are seeking guidance in defining what implementation looks like when it's successful at the organizational level. There are a lot of stories on using the standard at the project level, but people are more interested, how do we upscale what we're doing on some projects organizationally so that we can use the standard on all our projects moving forward. So that's why this is needed. So given that those were the reasons why the white paper was needed, we really talked about what should be in the content. We had some idea from the roadmap, what we needed to put in the paper, but then we started looking at it from a domain expert, and so we thought that we would do a few things. First, introduce the infrastructure domain extensions available in 4.3 at a high level, right? And then direct people to more information where it's available on BSI website. Explain fundamental concepts that is not duplicating what's already online, right? So, but bringing those fundamental concepts to more of the practitioner level, someone who's new to IFC perhaps and does not understand the documentation. We also want to inform how to navigate and properly classify model objects within our data sets, and describe appropriate uses of IFC, when it is a good fit in your project and when it's not. So just to manage expectations, right, on what we can do with the standard, what it is intended to be used for, and some of the limitations that we may have today, but maybe not in the future. Also, we want to identify common pitfalls and key success factors for implementation in the infrastructure sector. We want to explore how IFC models can be effectively exchanged between tasks at different stages in the infrastructure life cycle. So those are the main objectives for the content that we're developing. And hopefully this is, hitting the mark on what is needed at the practitioner level. One of the things that we thought would be helpful was to explain key concepts, objects, relationships, properties of containing the standard today through actual examples using infrastructure models. A lot of the examples that we see often are, commercial vertical construction, and we thought that we needed to make this paper more visual so that you can relate to, if you are a modeler and you're new to IFC, you start understanding the key pieces that allows us to implement IFC effectively. How to navigate the schema, how to classify map objects, and those types of things. So we also want to take the opportunity to try to address how to navigate today's challenges. We know that there are some challenges today, but it doesn't mean we can't use it, right? So some of the challenges that we've identified so far is that the standard has an extensive scope and continues to evolve, right? So we need to take that into account as we develop the content. There's no one way to implement the standard. The standard is meant to be pretty open and flexible so that each country or project can define and should define their structure containment for infrastructure. There is no consensus on doing that today and how to classify objects appropriately. So we want to take a look at what that means. We also know that implementation has been on a project by project basis. And so this makes it harder for the knowledge to be shared widely. And so we're hoping that we can provide some recommendations here on how to expand and do that knowledge transfer. We know that the authoring software may not be fully compatible at this time with 4.3, but there are ways to configure the software to help produce quality IFC files consistently, and that's why we brought in the vendors to provide input on this guide and get some best practices that can help us in the future. We also know that even though this is what it is about effectively implementing IFC at the project or the organizational level, it is not, you cannot implement the standard in isolation, right? And so some of the things that we want to touch on, but not necessarily go into a lot of details, is the overall complementary open BIM standards and services. So what do we do once we create a file? How do we know it's a quality file? How do we check it? And so we want to make sure that we provide some of that context of how these other items within the open standards like IDS and the BSDD and the validation service specifically, those three items, complement quality IFC and implementing IFC at the project level or the organizational level. So, this is just a rather simple graphic, right? But we want to, at a high level, explain how these different standards fit within your implementation. And so we want to walk through that process with an example of IFC, right? So the modeler uses the authoring software to create your models in whatever software of choice. But how do we enrich that model through the BSDD specific to your project or country, right? So being able to leverage that information there. And then, of course, once you've done that, export that IFC. And, at this point, we're focusing on the alignment-based view, since that is specific to infrastructure. We want to look at an example that allows us to do that. And then what happens afterwards? So at this point, then we would run the file through the validation service to check compliance with the standard. So what happens if it passes? We move on to the next step. But if it doesn't, then we need to go back to figuring out where in the process we need to change things, whether it's all the way to the model authoring platform or through the BSDD, and working with our software technology partners. And then once we figure out, this is what's happening, and we can successfully validate an IFC file, then how do we validate that file for actual information requirements? That's where the IDS come in. And then, of course, if that doesn't pass, it's kind of a similar cyclical type workflow, trying to figure out where the problem is. So, from our perspective, and particularly the way that I understand the standard as a practitioner, this is very helpful for me and my team working on projects and helping owners understand how to develop their standards or their requirements for using IFC, so that exchanges can happen. So I think that's kind of the storyline that we want to put in this particular paper, is what the workflow is at a general level, right? Because workflows are going to be very specific to the software that you use and the specific requirements. But at a high level, if we follow these types of steps, we are going to successfully implement IFC and continue to share that knowledge with the rest of the community. So rather simple, like you said, like you see here. We're not very far into the details of the paper. We are developing that content as we speak. But I think at this point, I want to pause if we have time, or at the end. I don't know how you want to do that, John or Mark. But seeing what the paper is trying to accomplish, I would love to hear some input from people in the room or online. What are some of the things that we should consider at this point?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alexa. Thanks for giving us the overview and the update on where you are. As Alexa said, and as Alexa's beaming in from sunny Oklahoma to sunny Marrakesh, if she wishes to stay with us, she's more than welcome, but she may also wish to depart after her presentation. So if we have any questions or comments on what you just heard from Alexa, now's the opportunity. Please raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone. And if there's any questions or comments from anybody online, please post them in the comments box and we'll raise them as well.
Going once.
Yeah, Alexa. Alexa, I know you covered this in terms of the timeline and your expectations that you're working to 2024 into 2025. Along the way, do you think we need to broaden out the results of the working before they're published? Beyond the working group and beyond the infrastructure domain, do we need to introduce it to other domains and get a consensus, as it were, from other parties? What's your view on that?
Yeah, we think that having a public comment period would be very helpful before that is published. How we do that, we would have to figure out, right? I don't know if that is, if we put it for public comment, there's got to be a way to collect that feedback in some kind of organized manner. But I would be very supportive of that. I think we want to make sure that this is going to meet the needs of the community. And I think that even though this is, for infrastructure, right, we're going to have examples of infrastructure projects. The process to implement this standard effectively, it's applicable to all the domains. So if we want to start first with getting input from our domain, we could start there and then also give the opportunity to other domains to comment and take it from there.
Of the 9 user stories, and from those we then also collected feedback as far as the user stories that sort of rose to the surface as most interesting to the audience. We asked what would be the purpose of a particular use case. In this case, it was large scale development, an entire highway corridor being developed, large scale as compared to perhaps an individual building or subsurface. We asked what would be the inputs to that particular use case or user story, and we asked them what might be the outcomes. So we gathered hundreds, literally hundreds of bits of information about 3 different user stories: purpose, input for urban planning, and then the third one, digital as-builts, was one of the stories that rose to the surface. So this content came in through Menti. One of the other leads at buildingSMART working on the GIS and BIM intersection, Eric Poirier from ETS University in Quebec, he had some of his grad students analyze some of this data. And this already is making its way into the software vendors' treasure chest of content that helps them know how to develop the applications that support this interoperability. So we had a very productive session. We then held a webinar through buildingSMART promoting some of this information. If we were in Valencia in March, I believe in May we did a webinar, and here we are at the end of the summer, still making great progress. There's also a QR code here that I want to share with you. buildingSMART has published a enabling information continuity across BIM and GIS domains. So this is a combination of some of the findings from Valencia. It already was actually quite far along, developed in conjunction with OGC, who in some ways is the geospatial counterpart, if you will, of the BIM and GIS world with standards and vendors and users participating. The roadmap that I showed a moment ago has been vetted by buildingSMART executives, buildingSMART management, buildingSMART steering committee, strategic committee, as well as on the OGC side as well. So we've got buy-in from both of the major parties, and members from various working groups of the organizations are pushing forward, and we're working towards regular meetings of a steering group that crosses both organizations. In the world of the buildingSMART domains, infrastructure, like I mentioned, we've already been essentially leading this effort. The railway working group is on board, airport, maritime, and the digital twin working group are all providing members to a cross-domain working group to focus on this topic. The others, we may get some folks from construction, buildings, maybe not, just because of the sort of micro scale, if you will, of a building compared to the large benefit that GIS delivers. On the OGC side, there are 4 working groups as well who are contributing towards this interoperability effort. And even ISO, Eric Poirier sits on a number of ISO committees. These are some of the many ISO efforts that have an intersection between BIM and GIS. Not all of them are actually delivering content. And so I just want to quickly go through these 9 stories that we talked about, use cases that we reviewed. And we'll do actually in more depth tomorrow, 3:30 to 5 o'clock. We have a 90-minute session on BIM and GIS. Please go there as well. Be joining me. We shared these use cases, these user stories, these concepts in Valencia. And like I said, through a show of hands, through Menti, we collected quite a bit of information. Has proved to be quite valuable in the this ongoing process. As we talked about GIS going solutions, like I said, was the one that sort of rose to the surface as the most interesting to the audience who were in Valencia. Subsurface design and engineering was one we talked about as well, especially as the infrastructure domain, the tunnel work, the geotechnical efforts are gaining traction. As it pertains to BIM models, BIM data, BIM information going into GIS applications, again, we had 3 stories. These came from the working group that was getting together on a regular basis. Urban planning was the one that was most interesting to the audience. Operations and maintenance we talked about a little bit, as well as facilities management, where you can imagine the capabilities of GIS, spatial analytics, location intelligence, asset finding, wayfinding were discussed and batted around, space planning. I think that by means of the attendees of a buildingSMART conference, things like facilities management and operations were a little bit interesting in some of the other topics. And then finally, this idea of blurring the lines of BIM and GIS. The federated model is a legal document, a big topic in the US right now, trying to get away the legal requirement that printed documents are the only legal description of projects, but actually going towards model-based design, model-based construction. This was one that we talked about for a fair bit of really gaining traction, specifically in, I think, Pennsylvania in the United States and Texas in the United States. I'd love to know if there's other regions around the globe are working towards this type of concept. Construction collaboration, producing dashboards that combine BIM, GIS, reality capture, schedule information, stakeholder outreach, singular dashboards where, again, you kind of would have a hard time saying where the GIS starts and BIM starts and where one ends and the other. They were discussed for up to 10 minutes per story in an audience of about 150 people, and then everyone voted and weighed in on it. And then finally, digital as-builts. This is one of my favorite examples. This is San Francisco Airport, who have truly combined GIS and BIM for dozens of use cases. And no surprise, this was one that, again, rose to the surface as most interesting. So the point we're at right now, we have taken all 9 of those use cases. A couple of them have a fair bit of detail added to them. This is the use case management tool that was today by Tina. There are some use cases in there, but they're very, quite frankly, immature. They're very thin in their level of details, and they're at a stage where they actually are not even available to the general buildingSMART community. So we do have 9 of them listed. In some cases, basic information has been added in the description, the purpose and scope of that use case or that user story, the BIM objectives and benefits, and the limitations of that user story. But in all of the cases, all 9 of those, we don't have a process diagram. We don't have an interaction plan. We don't have a transaction diagram. And these are all the tabs of the buildingSMART use case management tool. So it's still quite thin and really isn't enough for an implementer to act on and do anything in a sort of a consistent basis across the buildingSMART community. And so where we're at, the cross buildingSMART Open BIM GIS Steering Committee, we're aggregating these use cases and user stories. We want to identify the overlaps. So in the infrastructure domain, the use cases and user stories that are going to be most interesting are likely to be ones of grand scale. Railway as well. But perhaps construction might be more limited to an individual project where location information, spatial analytics might be most interesting to planning the details of construction. So we want to gather use cases across as many domains as possible, focus on the high priority ones across all of the domains. We expect to have a number of meetings to generate those use cases, a number of meetings to prioritize and add details to them. And then our goal is by Singapore to have this fleshed out, to have the use cases in the use case management tool, and then have a call for pilots. So if there's any one takeaway I want to leave you with as the leader of the GIS BIM working group in the infrastructure domain is soliciting more people. We've had, I think we had great traction at the beginning of the summer. Things slowed down at the end of the summer. I think I accidentally deleted the meeting from our calendar, so I need to reinitiate that. But certainly looking for more people to participate in these conversations where we develop a library of use cases. We aggregate them together. We get a number of perspectives, and then we start to put some more details on them so that they can become the content that implementers use as GIS and BIM interoperability is developed.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for taking us through your working group and the great progress that's been made there in the BIM and GIS world, as you said. Any thoughts, questions, or comments that anyone wishes to raise? I think Phil might have a comment to make.
It's just very interesting stuff you've done. I've not really visualized this too much before, but the interesting thing to me has always been that there's a line that moves between BIM and GIS and what is the granularity. And so you tend to look at linearity as a GIS problem. But in fact, in 4.3, we've given linearity into BIM. And so we should be producing linearity out of BIM to deliver continuity out of GIS. And I've always looked at it like this. So I've watched the GIS world, and it's gradually, with City GML, moving towards the light switch. And I've watched BIM, and we've moved towards the light switch towards linearity and world coordinates, if you like. And so one of the important things we need to be able to do in this is to actually say, where does BIM sit in this, and where does GIS sit in this? Because we need the guys who are actually designing the railways and the roads and the pipelines to be able to do their linearity. They'll do corridor mapping in BIM. They won't do it in GIS. You think they do it in GIS, but actually most of the solutions out there, corridor mapping in Civil 3D is all done inside of a BIM tool. So you need to recognize that actually BIM starts to stretch into GIS, and GIS stretches back into BIM. And it's actually one of the things we need to get out of this is actually, where the action needs to be in terms of the guys that are practitioners that are developing this. Now, I spent a long time of my life looking at linearity and problems of how do you segment roads and things, and dynamic segmentation and all that stuff. And actually, you had to be really careful with dynamic segmentation, because GIS looked at it from a GIS point of view, and actually how you segment a road actually is completely variable depending on the parameters you're looking at. And so it is much better done in BIM than it is in GIS. Although, if you're selling me GIS, you're trying to sell me the GIS solution, which I've worked with, by the way, all the way from MapInfo onwards, to actually saying we need BIM to be able to solve this level of granularity on these types of projects. And it's a dilemma. Okay, I'm just trying to
an opportunity.
Or it's an opportunity. Yeah. It really is an opportunity, because we shouldn't be fighting over this space at all.
No.
It's horses for courses, the right tool for the right job.
I've upset a few people at Esri when I've said that we are a BIM company as well as a GIS company.
Yes, yes.
And they didn't like that, because the company is based on GIS, and other companies who we partner with are based on BIM. But the definition, the examples I showed there, like I said, where is the line? And like you just said, where is the line between the two? In some cases, it's very blurry, and we need use cases to put some quantification.
This is coming from personal experience, where I've had the guys from your company come in and say, "Oh, you can solve all of this with my tool, and all you need is AutoCAD to whatever it might be." And when you start going through, you actually say, "Oh no, there's some problems here we haven't resolved," and we need to look at it as a whole rather than a part. So let's get the sales guys out of this, and let's get the practicality into it. And this is a good step towards it.
Thank you.
Hi, Franz Josef from ÖBB. I just want to add something to this, because today it is the case that, okay, we have this nice open BIM files, the GIS, and to move them to GIS, you have to kind of import or whatever to do. And I just learned today that IFC5 is going in this direction, that you can modularize those elements, which would be positive. I think if in the development of IFC5, we already think about those things he said.
No, the move IFC5 direction as a service versus a file is very good for GIS. GIS has, as far as I know, almost always been a data-driven application as opposed to a file-based application. So the current interoperability is sometimes a bit challenging, because it is an export, translate, transform, load, one-way, dead-end, shape file kind of workflow, or Revit file or IFC file, or it's a file import. But when IFC does become truly a modularized web service, it's going to be very complementary to the architecture of GIS solutions. So yeah, we've had early conversations. Yeah, very, very much. And again, that line between the two, I think, is going to get fuzzier because you're not going to get to a dead end and export a file and nail it down and then have to import it.
Sorry to dominate the microphone. The IFC5, great, future, and we can work in objects and what have you. Actually, the practical way we work in industry is federation, and it will remain federation for a long time. We're taking a long time to even get the industry to accept federation. Yeah. And they're still dragging their heels. If we then say, well, now you've got to start saying, my little object goes into here, and my little object goes, it will come, but it needs to come practically. We're in today's situation where we need to be able to federate GIS models and BIM models as we are, because I'm not going to give you forecasts when IFC 5 will come, but actually, you know, if it comes in 4 years' time, then actually it's for infiltration to the industry is another 4 years. We've got to be able to start. It's possible to do this now. So, you know,
yes,
let's look at those practical situations and not dream about technology of the future.
Well, no, we can't dream about technology in the future, but we do need to make sure that the implementers have the pieces they need to be able to get that accomplished in less than 8 years, as you just projected. Yeah, today we have 4.3. It's got a lot of capabilities as it pertains to the intersection of GIS and BIM with georeferencing and geotechnical capabilities. So I think we have a lot to work with right now. And I'll try to not be too salesy here, but you know, the term common data environment is one that you won't hear from Esri. In particular, we talk about a connected data environment because the world is federated. There is not a the term common data environment sort of instills this singular monolithic database of content in some people's minds, and that is not the real world. Yeah. Common data environment in 19650 is a process, yes.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Phil, for your questions. Really good as always. Any other thoughts and comments before we got to hear from Mirbeck and Jiri yet? But any other final thoughts or comments for Mark before we move on? No?
Thank you.
I think we're good. Thanks, Mark. Very good. So, Mirbeck, I think you're up next. Is that right?
He's asking for if we have its content.
Do we? What are you expecting me to have at this point? Oh, an email. Okay, excellent. I'll just, you come and join us at the front. Have a chat with Mark, and I'll just get that going. Introduce.
Do us a little song and dance here.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Mirbeck could introduce his session, which roadmap, which working group it is, and
BSD for infra.
Longer introduction would be helpful.
All right. Okay. I should kill time. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, whatever. Hello, everybody online. I'm Mirbeck, I believe. I'm technical project manager of buildingSMART Germany, and I am pleased to introduce our working group, which I will in detail explain you. And we have no slides today. We have only one QR code that you can simply scan. We have a link to my report. We are open, like our open standards and services. So we simply open you what we are doing there. So you can also join, provide your opinion, provide your feedback, comment. Please don't delete anything there. That's the most important thing. And what's important is we want to get as much as possible feedback from domain experts. That's most important that we want to have. Of course, we would like to involve software vendors because they are important. If we're talking about BSDD, BSDD has many, let's say, opportunities to link with the API. So software vendors now starting to implement that. And that's exactly the point when we can use that dictionaries, BSDD dictionaries, and we can use content, we can apply that content into you already, so can you show the QR code itself for a moment? So we are quite small group. Consists of domain and domain experts and of course software vendors. We have chapters. Initially, this project was initiated by Strabag, the Jürgen Lich. He is not present today, but he had an idea. We need to have a catalog that will be harmonized and be used worldwide. Of course, there are national ones, and that's what we thought. We need to harmonize BSTD for infrastructure so that we will be able to use it. And then, if you go deeper, we started with a kickoff session, but we invited experts who will be simply the core of this group, who will be helping bringing the work forward. And what is important here, we of course keen to have an opinion, not just from domains, but also from chapters. So that we have in Germany, we have related infrastructure working groups. We have a domain itself, of course, we still call it rooms, and the infrastructure room with its working groups. And we got a roadmap, let's say, sessions. And one of the result, you can see that on my report. As soon as we started working group and at the first kickoff session, we thought, what could we do in this initiative or this working group? Of course, we have BSTD and it's main market of BSTD. Let's simply go through in the existing dictionaries in BSTD. Are they up to date? Does they provide answers? Do we need to do some homework, update them, or if someone is representing, if we need to go through them? So at the first session, after as a homework, everyone had the chance to go through some related dictionaries. So we simply posted some links to the dictionaries, saying this dictionary is interesting. Let's go through and analyze it. Let's give an feedback. So that's what we did so far. And there's a frame. I can do it even this way. I think we can put in the presentation mode as a frame. And then as soon as you go follow the links, you will end up in BSTD. So that there's a chance that we brought all that content together. As a second meeting, we thought we will need to collect some opinion. What is currently going well, what we need to improve. There are some sticky notes. If you have some sticky notes, I mean, your comments, your wishes, feel free to add them. Please put your name there. That's important. So we can track who did it, who wrote that comment. So we can simply track and give you feedback, or we can invite you and we can discuss with you. That's important. Just in some small examples, we had of course, some opinion about harmonization. There is already a dictionary. There is IFC dictionary, and IFC 4.3 reflects many things like roads, rail. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have some stuff, but we need some more content. That's what I remember discussed within the next session. You remember we had some, sorry, I'm trying to find that sticky notes. Yeah. Possible outcomes. And that was a common opinion of working group. Common, it was not one person, but several. And we had at least as an outcome of the sessions, of those online sessions that we did run, that we need to have one harmonized dictionary for infrastructure, so that it will not just copy of IFC, but it will be mapped with IFC properly. The content, we need to have harmonized ideas. It's not the scope of this working group, but as a message that as soon as you have a content in BSTD as a dictionary, you can use content from the dictionary as a basis also for your ideas for creation. You can simply map it. So it's one click. So we need to have harmonized material catalogs. There are like beton in Germany. It's a concrete in English speaking countries, and that's like a beton also in Russian. So the same way. So you have a common understanding of our material. So that will also need. We have we need to have a guidance how to use it after all, at least written, so that like Alexa she also mentioned how we use IFC, right? IFC for Photon 3. We also need to have explain people. That's what we need to do with BSTD content. We, of course, that's, I guess that was a point when it's helpful to have some interesting cases when you have classes, types, I mean, predefined types that you probably will need in a new IFC schema. Then you can propose them through BSTD. You may need additional property sets. So that was, I guess, that what was an idea. And someone, IFC team, BSI IFC team or experts, they can take that also into account. That was, I guess, also a discussion about this entity's recommendation. And of course, if you already know that, you can definitely name it. You will have potential extension. We have, that's a long one. I can, yeah. So we have, of course, national standards, national dictionaries, or let's say that you can derive, but they are, of course, mapped to each other. That's, by the way, possible point. When you match one dictionary with a, there are different kind of types in dictionary, like it's similar, has a relation, or type of, or has is equal to, and so on. So there are many interesting things that you can simply go through. Harmonize the translation for that dictionary. Why harmonize? Because we need to understand what it's about, right? Not everyone can read in maybe in Japan or in other country. Is it related to my use case? There are many global companies who are contractors, and they also need to do the same procedure for other country. That's important, translation work. And there is a, by the way, IFC translation framework that you can also join by doing so. And as a result, we spoke what we could present as an example, and then we analyzed two simply, sorry for correction, three dictionaries. One is from Finland, another one from Germany, on water management, and Finnish was a transportation road, right? Roads, rail, sorry, rails. Okay, road, rail, and bridge. And we have one example dictionary that we'll be presenting tomorrow at 3:30. We simply took as much as maximum as I mean, if it was possible, to show what is capable, how it should look like, and what's important to do relations between entities, I mean between classes, to create hierarchy, to map it not only within the dictionary, but also mention other dictionaries, because there are relations that also incoming shows you incoming relations. So you can potentially harmonize one dictionary with another dictionary. And most important, as a minimum, it should be mapped with IFC dictionary. That's, I guess, a very important part. So we will do the next rounds of sessions somewhere again, and after the summit we definitely will meet and continue with the work. And of course, you're all welcome to provide your comments, leave your sticky notes, your contacts, so we can reach you out as well. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully
Excellent.
we can see you tomorrow as well.
Thank you, Mirbek. Thank you for that overview of the working group, BSDD for infrastructure. And as you say, you've got a demonstration tomorrow in this room at 3:30, I think. Yep. Where there'll be a demonstration of how to use BSDD to retrofit an existing building.
That's a different session. There's a building domain.
Okay. What are you doing at 3:30
tomorrow? We will simply go through. We have different kind of strategic groups and activities. One is which is like parallel, was a water management, and there was also initiative to cover high and medium voltage. Now it's simply called power transmission distribution. And just in order to not to create one domain that someone should start somewhere to show that it's possible, you can start using it. You to encourage especially those who are dealing with TND, I mean with transmission distribution, because we need, in order to do something, let's say even to create use case, you want to digitize that domain, right? But before you start, you need to know that assets, all that assets that you even. Example, there many times they were mentioning, let's have a use case, let's develop a use case for lighting of a substation. The first comment came from my side. Then you definitely need to cover all possible objects that in the substation. So you will start with a taxonomy. That's what we saw. Okay, as soon as you have a taxonomy, all classes, classes types, and will land up in that dictionary. So that is a first demonstration. It's just a simple high voltage transmission tower, just an example with a type with some property sets or properties were related to that tower. So. And
okay.
That's, after all,
thank you. And we're trailing what's going on tomorrow, aren't we? Yeah. Despite the fact I'm not sure quite what time it is taking place. But come back to this room tomorrow to hear more from Mirbek on this topic. Thank you, Mirbek. That was great. And Tina as well. That'll be good. Do we have any questions in the room or online for Mirbek? Tina has a hand up. Thank you. Do you want to use them?
Yeah, maybe I would like to underline that this is just the first version of the working group work, and maybe those possible outcomes are something that are just in the ideal level yet. So we are not sure that what should be the end deliverable of the working group work, and that's why we need an input from the industry for this work, because I'm not even sure that do we really need the harmonized material content to be SDD. So that's for one topic to discuss. So other kind of like this missing entities. So I think these are important topics to go through as a kind of community.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's a living project. There will be always a progress. There will be always updates, and we will not simply stack. This is our best case. No, we simply continue. As soon as you have some better ideas and some further proposals, we are open for every kind of new directions. But in general, we have a direction. We need something in BSTD that everyone can profit from. Thank you.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Mirbek. Thank you, Tina. I think we'll move on to hear from Jiri, our fourth and final roadmap working group update today. So please come and join us, Jiri. Stand or sit, it's up to you.
Okay. Thank you for the possibility to stay here with you. I am here as a standard member of BSI, which is called Pegopre, as the member of Czech national standard body. Our task, or let's say our project, is about creating the white paper about using IDS in infrastructure. And our working group consists, let's say, from the guys who came from Czech environment and even from the participants which shows an interest about participating in this work group. And thanks to the topic, which should be about using IDS in infrastructure, we thought that can be much more useful for producing some reasonable output to prepare it as a use case which comes from environment and then bring it out into the international level and talk about it, how the others can see it. And because the IDS, it's open standard based on the work of BSI, and it's very close connected with other topics which was presented here before, especially on the topics of Mirbeck and the work with data dictionary, and in the case of infrastructure, the work with IFC 4.3 scheme. So that means it was really important to find out how to understand each other. Only for example, what we have here in BSI community, we are using the term like linked data, taxonomy, or etc. But in the base, it means from the point of view of international standard, it means ontology, and it means to understand each other. So we took some information requirements based on some local needs. We did some mapping towards the IFC 4.3 schema, and then we end up easily to create a connection to the BSDD. So that means means we did all 4 steps which are described up there. So that means ontology were produced based on the information needs and what is stored in BSDD, then information requirements based on the local needs, and create and testing IDS according buildingSMART standards. Then what it needs to be done is bring on the international level, ask for help other members, and ask them for bringing their opinion and discuss about the issue at all. So I would like to present the steps which has been done on some example. Yep. Here, as you can see, how we thought about bringing it together. On the right side is what every one of us really know very well. That's IFC 4.3 schema within BSDD. And then on the left side is local data dictionary. What is really good, how is BSI working, is that they are following also the proper standards who talking about creating ontology, and especially the using of unique identifiers of each terms. That's the URI code. And also in the most of the classes are the definitions, and the definitions are built according ISO 6707 part 1, what is building dictionary. And by this way, it's also possible to connect it with local data dictionary to do the proper mapping and start to build up the ideas at all. Next, please. I thought even if it's overlapping with other topics and other projects, I think that all of us has to follow the technical standards, and I thought that it's quite important to show it, because even if it's hidden behind different names, what we are using, it's the important stuff to mention the standards which are used for creating the ontology and build up these at all. Because behind all of this are running some ontology stuff which helps us to create linked data, and in the real usage it was the way how we were able to do the mapping in between local needs and then provide the information delivery specification even for the infrastructure project. Because what I can say only from our practice as a designer company, it's even in one local language you have such many different terms, which means the one meaning. I guess you know it even from the difference in between US and English and British English. So there are also a lot of things like that. So the step which took us quite a long time, because we want to bring some reasonable testings and some reasonable input for the discussion, and that was the creating the linked data itself. Here you can see that we used the glossary. The glossary means like the data source built on the local information needs and on building smart data dictionary by using of predicates, which is something like the relationship. We were able to do the mapping in between terms, and then get a simple and trustable source for creating ideas definition. This is the example of one used term within our infra experiment. Yep, and now finally to the real example of IDS. Here, as you can see, even if it's scrolled up the classes which were used in IDS, and then the definition came from the local information needs, which are presented by some terms and its definition, and then within the I structure it was mapped towards IFC classes, and then was evaluated the classes if were used the correct way, and even the properties of the object. And the experiment was ended like that, that we use it on some experimental object, which is here shown that the creator of the 3D representation used the wrong IFC classes, but at least it was used there the proper or the right properties as was required from local information needs. So this is an example shown what was done, and this is like the first input into the wider discussion about the topic, because I think that we have to consider that not only the IFC schema as it is designed, but it's also exist many specific information needs, like which comes from local authorities and the projects and etc. And all of this is necessary to consider when we are creating useful ideas as the information delivery specification for deliver the information requirement between the projects and between the users. So I would like to thanks also who participate on this example or on this first input for our small project. And now I would like to share it through the box and invite the others for cooperation and for sharing their experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiri. Thank you for that overview of your working group. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody on what Jiri has just presented?
Peter Axelsson from Sweden. Thank you for the interesting presentation here. Regarding the requirements, would you say that the requirements are tied to some kind of use case or a delivery phase, or what kind of requirements would you say that you have used for this in this case?
We used the requirements which came from our local transport authorities. Requirements are focused on project phase and on project delivery in different preparation phase before the construction is started. Before construction, yes.
Any other thoughts or questions from anybody, please? No, I don't think we have. So thank you very much, Jiri.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Did you want to sum up, Mark?
Yeah, great progress. I hadn't seen actually these updates from your Mirbeck before. Alexa and I had been keeping in touch. I knew that she was making great progress. Please, as I think we've all said, we're continuing to look for feedback or participation on an ongoing basis. I know I particularly am on the GIS and Open BIM. Yuri made the call as well, requesting it in Mirbeck as well with an open Miro board. These things come together only by ongoing participation. We're all volunteers in this effort, so any time that you can give to these efforts just helps push the ball forward. So with that, I think we can wrap up. Thank you for your time and interest in the infrastructure domain.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, that wraps up Infrastructure Domain Session 2. Thanks to all the speakers and to Mark for hosting us today. It's 10 to 5 now. We've finished 10 minutes early. Still time to catch 10 minutes in another room if you wish to. Or you may wish to go and find somewhere sunny to refresh yourselves. The choice is yours. We'll be back here tomorrow with a full day of Summit domain sessions from 9 a.m. So have a good day and a good evening. See you tomorrow. Bye.